Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. I admit I'm a little nervous because I haven't done this, during the pandemic, so wow. But thanks everyone for coming. So my name is Jd, and I have two 12 by 12 blueprints that are in the resistance section of the show. So you'll probably have seen it when you entered Lawndale. So let's take a closer look. The left one says, if you can see, it says, "It is now time to open Texas 100%. And the right one says, "I'm ending the statewide mask mandate." So this project was a direct response to Governor Greg Abbott's speech in Lubbock, Texas, that was earlier in March of this year. And so in that speech, he rescinded the statewide mask mandate. So what I did was quoted parts of his speech and made it the subject of my work. So you can kind of see it here. It says, "I'm ending the statewide mask mandate." So within each one of these works, what I did was I chose one word and decided to sort of distort it or smear it. And that sort of distortion was my way of communicating the distrust that I felt in the decision. Obviously, I personally disagree. And it was, I sort of equated to, imagine if this sentence was written in wet paint. So, you just take your hand and smear the word, so in a way to sort of mock the decision. So that's really the project in a nutshell. It's my way of sort of expressing disagreement. As far as creating the work, it was primarily created in Photoshop, with the exception of the actual distorted word that says ending. And that I created by literally printing it on a sheet of paper and placing it on a flatbed scanner and really just moving it around until I got the desired effect. And so, of course, there was a lot of trial and error. So here are 3 of the iterations that I got. Yeah, so if you look at the right one, it was a bit unreadable. It wasn't what I was looking for. And then the left two, you can make out the word, but it didn't have the personality I was going for. Also, it wasn't as horizontal as I wanted it. So I tried some more, and I finally got some more consistent results where you get more of this vertical distortion of each of the words. Eventually, I finally arrived at this. So I like this a lot more because you can sort of make out the word ending on the top and then on the bottom a little bit. And then just in the middle, you can kind of get lost. You don't really know what it says, and I really like how these vertical bars look. So if you take a good look at this, it lands itself in this final composition that says, "I'm ending the statewide mask mandate." So the blue color, you probably can't see it. If you see it in person, I promise you'll see the blue color, but it's a blue to black gradient. The blue color and the font that I use, that came directly from the governor's website. I figured that if I'm representing him in a speech, I might as well use his graphic identity in a digital work. The gradient itself, though, that was more of a stylistic choice. I just thought having a plain blue background would be too boring, to be quite honest. But I think it could also be, read or interpreted as part of the concept where it sort of goes into darkness. So that's really, I can't believe I did it. That's really what the project is. So once again, my name is Jd, and I also have a background in photography and fashion design. So my Instagram and website if you're interested in following my work. And with that being said, does anybody have any questions for me? Or did I explain it too much? Yes.
Was this a real departure from work you've done previously, or very much in line with that?
I'd say a departure from other work, just because I have primarily worked with photography. So you would see more photographic elements. However, in past works, I have used a flatbed scanner to scan my hands or something, and so with that same method, I applied to printed words. So it's related, but definitely a departure. Yes.
What are your plans for your artwork in the future?
That's a really good question. As far as the future goes, I would say, really trying to explore more of the type of things that I can do, because I've said that I've done fashion and photography, so it's kind of whatever concept I have, I want to see like how I can maximize by using these different languages, whether it be photography, graphic design, or fashion, to see like how the final work can exist. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is J.J. Baker, let's see, I'm going to show my work here real quick if you haven't seen it. It's around the corner to the left. It's a painting of my sister, and I'm going to tell you basically why I made that painting, give you the story, the background of like how that painting came to be. First, I would like to say thank you all for coming. There's a million other places you could be right now, but you decided to be here, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Lawndale, as well, for putting this show on. It's a super cool show, a lot of great artists in the show, so it's really an honor to be a part of this. But to get to this painting, we're going to start way back. We're going to start with this image, not made by me. You're probably all familiar with this. We know exactly what this is. You know, Sistine Chapel, made by Michelangelo. We see two hands, the hand of man, the hand of God, reaching towards each other. Looking at this recently, I noticed this kind of curious. Man's hand is kind of limp. He's like, eh. God is like, he's actually trying to like touch. I just noticed that. It's a random thing. But hands are very important, as is this man, Michelangelo. So of course, Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo, of course, 4 years. And a couple years ago at the Fine Art Museum of Houston, they had a show about Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel, where they had this painting. This painting is made by Daniel de Volterra, who is a friend of Michelangelo, a younger man, definitely looked up to Michelangelo and did this portrait of him. When I saw this painting, I was fascinated by it. It's such an interesting painting coming from the 1500s. It's unfinished, so that's why you have this kind of red, kind of muddled background, but you see his face and his left hand. Now that's important because Michelangelo famously had a broken nose and was left-handed. When I was looking at this painting, I was like, I am left-handed, I have a broken nose, I should probably do a painting as Michelangelo. So, I made a painting. This is my self-portrait as Michelangelo, and I worked with my good friend Jan Ratia. He took reference photos for me. He came to my studio. We're basically reimagining the pose, trying to recreate it, and when we were doing that, we realized that like his kind of outline of his like shirt is very like kind of puffy, and Jan was like, we need to make your shirt puffier. So I found this guy who was in my studio, and I was like, all right, let me put on my college sweatshirt to get that puffiness. And so it became part of the photo, and then I liked the font of college in there, and so I ended up keeping that in the painting. I also took the museum ticket from the show that had this painting, and I collaged that into the painting itself. And then there's a couple other motifs in here that continued throughout a series of work, such as the top left. You can't really see it on the image, but there's like a browser tab window, and that became a motif in some of my work. So I made this self-portrait as Michelangelo. It kind of dovetailed into like a whole series that had these recurring motifs. And when I was working on this, I was like, I want to paint my sister. I want to get her in this body of work. And she went to Boston College, so I'm like, I'm definitely gonna have her in a Boston College sweatshirt to have like a connection to this work. And I asked my sister, like, how should I paint you? What image should I use? And she's like, let's use that Goya painting of the Black Duchess. And I didn't know the painting at first, and I was impressed because she doesn't know many more paintings than I do. So she was talking about this painting, and I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And so we have a photo shoot. She wears her Boston College sweatshirt. And I kind of had to persuade her to do it. She didn't want to do it at first, but she did agree, and so we did a photo shoot, and it was perfect because by the end of it, she was tired of it and just didn't want to be there. And so like the last couple photos were the perfect photos because she just had this look on her face like, do not fuck with me, I do not want to be here, which was exactly what I needed to make this painting. And so this painting is a continuation of that series. Now, the crazy part about all this was that this painting by Goya ended up in the Houston Fine Art Museum, just like this Michelangelo painting was in the Fine Art Museum. And so I took the museum ticket from that show. It is collaged on the painting. You can see it over there. It's attached by a magnet, so theoretically you can move it around the painting. And it's got all of these other motifs, multiple hands, browser tab windows, this crazy green that I love to use. And that's how I got to this painting. And I'm also running out of time, so I'm going to quickly jump through some other stuff. Another painting I've done, this is of my parents. So it's the same body of work. I used family members, set them up in these situations, and then flipping through real quick. Another self-portrait based off of Byzantine icons. Some other stuff, you focus on hands and faces. Last one, want to finish with a portrait of Anthony Paviano, who's also in the show. Don't think we have time for questions, but thank you.
Hello. So I haven't really exhibited my work in about 8 years. So this was the last time I showed. It was at Art League Houston. It was a two-part exhibition, so I'm like in the space, getting ready, preparing part two, surrounded by the paintings in part one. They're obviously text paintings. They were very autobiographical, maybe too much so. This is the painting that's upstairs here in the big show. It's called Men of Houston in Their Apartment. So the talk is going to be kind of how do we get from slide one to slide two. I am both of the figures. I'm the Men of Houston on the couch in the chair there. It was influenced by having seen Delacroix's Women of Algiers in Their Apartment at the Met retrospective in late 2018. I wasn't so much going to exoticize women in Algiers. I thought I'd, do that myself. And it's kind of about having a double life anyway. I've sort of, I'm a sex worker and an artist, and was an art critic, and have worked at Blaffers. I've kind of gone back and forth between, respectable and whatever sex work is over the years. And so in the paintings, some of them are actually based on my paintings, and then like some of them are like actually based on stills from like erotic videos that I've done. So now I'm kind of showing you the same view as that's in that painting, but we're going to go through the years of kind of how the work was developing. So these were like the text paintings. They had a really reflective element. So this is actually only lit by my computer monitor, like at night. The text had to go. I wanted to just kind of get down to painting, and so for a while it was abstract, very monochromatic, kind of influenced by some Augustine's abstractions. Then color kind of crept in. This was after a few years of gradually getting more and more color. It was kind of an atmospheric landscape, skies kind of vibe. And then it starts getting a little more, I guess some of the colors getting complicated. I'd already seen the Delacroix retrospective by this point, so some of the paintings like this one and that one and one in the lower corner are based on like details of certain Delacroix paintings I was looking at, or roughly inspired by what he was doing. And you can see the top center thing, there's sort of some architectural elements coming in. And then we start getting figures coming in, more interior spaces. This one here is actually a life-size study for the painting upstairs. So it's like, Conte crayon and charcoal and maybe pastel on canvas. And then like this one down here is actually, it's kind of my riff on a study that Renoir did after Delacroix's Jewish wedding in Morocco. My thing's more like a gay orgy or something, I guess. And then there's actually, there's a figure kind of doing a painting of the scene within the painting. So that's called Sketching in the Courtyard. And then, okay, so this is a few months ago. So there's the painting itself, surrounded by the type of stuff I'm sort of doing more of now. So like these are a couple of paintings that are done based on stills of some of my videos. And actually this one is on view at Bill Arning Exhibitions. He has a few of my paintings there, so if you want to check it out. You know where to go. So yeah, and then this is actually what you would see if you were sitting on the couch. This is the view of the opposite wall. So those are like, you know, the windows. That's my computer. These are for like Tondo format, kind of white on white paintings that I had been doing earlier. So from that sort of, you know, white on white period. And this is actually Mom's funeral. We went to, my mom died last year of COVID, during COVID, and so we were among those early Zoom funeral pioneers. And I guess this kind of just sums up my relationship, like that conflict between figuration and abstraction. It's called Bathhouse Guston. It was sort of inspired by, there's a photograph of James Ensor's Christ Entry into Brussels. It used to be owned by a casino in Belgium, and there's people just dancing in front of the painting. So that's, I don't know, same sentiment. But anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, you have a female artist. I decided to do this talk. Can you hear me at the back? Okay, thank you. I decided you needed to know something about me to understand my paintings. And the painting on the screen, Frozen Winter, actually is informed by my background. I was born in Norway, and I grew up in a small town, Sioux Lookout, Ontario, and we had snow from before Thanksgiving until after Easter. So I've got a lot of experience with snow. My mother worked for the forestry and my father for the lumber industry. And from a very early age, I was taught respect for the land. You can say I'm a tree hugger. I studied horticulture at Longwood Gardens, and I used this training for a career at Winterthur Museum and Library, which are both not-for-profit organizations, and education and conservation is what is stressed. I moved to the Woodlands 22 years ago, and I have participated in the block program at Glassell, and I also take classes at Rice to keep my mind sharp. I'm only discussing 2D and drawing, but I also work in ceramic sculpture. It's not necessarily known. So I'll talk now about the painting that's in the show. And it looks like a real place. My landscapes look like a real place. But what they really are, they're places in my mind. They're mindscapes. And I get at them, I call them suggestive landscape. And I also make organic abstraction. My art is informed by memories, and I've been exploring texture for about 15 years. So I'm going to show you how this painting, which is 3 feet by 3 feet and is on the wall there, fits in with my body of work. I've been consistent from the beginning in painting landscape and organic abstraction. When I began painting, it was stressed to paint what you know. And as I said, it was important to know my background to see my paintings. This is from a very special place in Northern Ontario, and this painting was made at the same time as Winter Frozen was. This is a journey up the fjord. It was from a trip from Bergen up to the border with Russia. And it was an image that just stayed in my mind. As I said, I've been exploring texture, so when you look at my paintings on the screen, please look at the amount of texture, because it varies. This is a recent painting. Again, this was at the same time as winter, and I was missing being in the mountains. I paint a lot of mountains. And this is the oldest painting. It's Echo 2, and you can see it's all texture. Quickly, I'm going to, this is about the prairies and the loss of land in the area. This shows you the texture in the next painting. And this is the last painting. And this image is from the show. And I guess I would like to end with an old proverb. We do not inherit the land from our fathers. We borrow it from the children. Thank you for your time.
Well, hello everyone, thanks for being here. My name is Paula Córdoba, and I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. My background is in visual arts, museum studies, and South colonial studies, disciplines that I intertwine in my practice. Buenos Aires is a South American city with great European legacy, mainly because of the migratory waves at the beginnings of the 20th century, when Argentina was thriving economically. And this brief Belle Epoque gave character to the city, especially in the architectural side. The experience of being raised there made me interested in identity as a social construction, borderlands, and colonial narratives that made us cling onto this European legacy and invisibilizing other cultures such as Arnetic cultures and African influences too. My imaginary comes from Buenos Aires architecture, particularly its facades, that are plenty of neoclassical imagery. But also I take inspiration from museum collections and domestic interiors. Through this imaginary, I acknowledge my heritage at the same time that I try to deconstruct it through shifts in scale and materiality, and also recurrent metamorphosis processes that are suggested in my work. This piece is titled after a musical work of Astor Piazzolla, an Argentine musician, which is an ode to nostalgia. I think that Buenos Aires must be the world capital of looking back, and then I wanted to present through this airy and unfinished pattern a paradox between forgetting and remembering. My body of work comprises sculpture, wall-hanging pieces, free-hanging pieces, and installation. The materiality is a key aspect of my work, and I try to communicate fluidity. I work with this special type of resin. It's flexible and rubbery to the touch. I wanted it to be also a tactile experience. The oversized patterns aim to enhance the multiple connections, and they speak about individuality and subjectivities. This particular piece is inspired by a type of lace that was introduced in colonial times. Those sun figures, for me, they represent also rhizomes. And rhizome is a sign, for me again, of cultural resistance. I see my work aligned with decolonial aesthetics, and it's inspired by authors such as Walter Mignolo and Enrique Dassel. When they speak about, I chose for the title and this series cultural wounds, but they speak about colonial wounds. And when they speak about that, they are representing the trauma inflicted in society by symbolic and physical violence, mainly through categorizations on races and genders. So I got to then with this introduction to show this piece. Actually, there are 3 pieces there. It's one piece conveyed by 3 sculptural objects, titled Cultural Wounds as well. And the ornamental is present in the base and in the patterns, which are taken from lace from the Renaissance. But at the same time, the overflowing liquids are making the wound visible. And well, just one more thing. The base also represents the female matrix, and in the history of art, it's about creation. So it's trying to present healing as well as new fluid ways of being, on being. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Drago, and I paint oil paintings of old women. And this is the piece in the show. Her name is Greta, and I chose her because it represents the last year and a half what the old people have gone through with COVID and being shut out from the rest of the world. And I've painted Greta several times. This is a 60 by 40 oil painting of Greta, and I saw her in a small town in Germany 2 years ago, and I noticed her walking her bike around town, and she had a disability with walking, and it looked like she was using her bicycle in place of a walker, and I really admired the creativity of doing that. There's a series of 5 paintings, 60 by 40, and there's a lot of space around them because women generally live longer than their partners and spend the last part of their life alone, and the space represents the loneliness. This is my mom, and when my dad died, she lost her identity. She was a wife and a caretaker, and she told me, I don't know who I am now. And it took her about a year and a half before she found an identity. But in this painting, she's carrying a portrait that's not finished to show that period of her life. And then she became in charge of the family night dinners at her church, and she was a fantastic cook. She got lots of recognition and praise and found an identity. My mom and I always teased each other a little throughout our lives, and I found a way to eternally tease her, because I painted her wearing Birkenstocks, which she would have never worn in her whole life. So this painting makes me giggle. This is Patty, and Patty raises chickens and shares eggs with other people. This is Virgie, and Virgie has a great big old lady purse, and she's ready to go and do things. And this last woman in the series is Claire. And Claire came into my studio and saw the other 4 paintings. And she's French and very old with dyed red hair and 4-inch heels. And she marched up to me and said, "Why don't you paint me?" And so I did. And I thought, well, what object could go with her? And I decided an aging French bulldog would go very well with Claire because they have similar personalities. these women are an awkward scale. The painting is to her and she gave it right back and said, no, I want to be on the wall with all the others. Because when I go out in public, I'm invisible. People don't look at really, really old people. And even if I go to a restaurant with my daughter, the waiter might ask my daughter what I want to eat. So if I look on the wall, people have to look at me. And this was a couple years ago, and then this spring her daughter called me, and Margot was 96 and she died. And the daughter wanted the portrait back. And I told her I'm doing a show at the Art League with all 100 portraits. And she said, oh, keep her there and let her go on the wall once more before she comes home. And so that really touched my heart. So thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Dupre. I'm a sculptor and mixed media artist. And what I'm going to show you today is my work from the last couple of years. I've been working, really focusing on something I'm calling the Southern Gothic. It's a group of works that delves the realm between geometric abstraction and storytelling, but in particular it's an exploration of this place that we inhabit, along with all the dark corners of our world, including our legacy of slavery, racism, and patriarchy, but also celebrates the lighter regionalisms, you know, the parts that make our world mystical and magical. I'm a Creole woman of color from New Orleans, and my first piece is a really personal piece. It's a piece in the show. It's called Home, St. Louis No. 3. Some people will hear the title and think that refers to the St. Louis Blues, which I'm totally okay with. That fits in the realm of what I'm doing. But more specifically, it refers to the St. Louis No. 3 cemetery, which is where my ancestors, my grandparents, are buried. If you know anything about New Orleans cemeteries, we bury our dead in crypts, which look like little houses. At least that's what I thought when I was a kid. We bury them above ground. And the piece here sort of references the funeral rites of Egyptian mummification and the preparation of the dead in fragments of binding tapes that are made from clothes that the dead would have worn during life. I think I've injected some humor, as we would in New Orleans, into death. It's a place where we consider living with the morbid and the macabre as part of the daily life and having some humor with it, as you can see with like our jazz funerals and so forth. So that's why we're on these kind of impossible little legs. This is another of my pieces. It's called Travois for Family. A travois is a drag cart. It's an unuseful tool of sorts. With a travois, it would be something you would carry behind you if you had a really heavy load. You're in the back country and your friend gets injured. You need to rescue someone. Or you're towing game that you've just hunted out of the woods. I'm following this with garrote. This is an angry and impotent piece of mine. It was my response to the events in the spring of 2020 when our past president so rudely and wrongly pushed Black Lives Matter protesters out in order to create a Bible-thumping, posturing photo op. And I wanted to make something from the sorts of things I might find as a child in my backyard, to sort of say, to express how furious I was. My center of fulfillment owes a great debt of gratitude. It's heavily influenced by Betty Saar and her loss of innocence piece. Betty Saar's loss of innocence was a lace christening gown suspended above an empty chair. Mine is a uniform of sorts above packages, and it's kind of a comment about waking up to realize that we're kind of here to fulfill Jeff Bezos' dreams. Okay, I'm just going to blow through my geometric abstractions. This is Origins of the Universe. It's a hand-sewn bowl made of discarded denim seams reinforced with doll needles on a base of reclaimed wood. And then these are 2D works. This is window woven, 5 men from Texas, Fayoum, and Cannon quilt. I've really enjoyed hearing everybody talk today, so thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about all these other wonderful works around the room.
Hello, I'm Vincent Fink. This is the piece that I have here in the show. It's called Atlas Metamorphosis Stage 1 of 4. So it's obviously 1 of 4 in this Metamorphosis series that I've been working on for over 10 years. It was originally inspired by an image that I saw in a dream, and I felt the need to recreate that so people could see what was in that dream as well. Otherwise, I was going to be the only person who ever saw that. And it was, so it took me on quite a ride, because here we are finally over 10 years later. It was about the 10-year mark actually when I finished this piece. It's just, there's so much that could go into this that it's definitely hard to kind of try to fit it into a little 5-minute bite, but I guess we could just kind of describe a little bit of what's going on here. So this is a 5-point perspective drawing. So there's a point at the top, bottom, left, and right, and then 1 point in the middle. These are all different vanishing points. So it creates this big, like, kind of fisheye effect. And it's pretty tricky to work with. This is actually the first time I did a piece in 5-point, but I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And so it's got this kind of Aztec Mayan thing going here, because basically each of these 4 stages, I'm kind of taking you through into this other world of this large beetle. He kind of is like a deity, but also like a just a leader, like a political leader. It's kind of like how a lot of civilizations have risen and fallen through time. Is essentially what this series is a commentary of. And so, as you can see here, this was actually the first piece. This was the one that I saw in the dream. So I started actually with stage 2 of 4, and it was, as you can see, it's got a kind of like an Asian, ancient Chinese kind of feel going there. That's the one that I saw in the dream. And so I was just kind of felt compelled to recreate that. This is the second one that I did in the series, stage 3. And as you can see, I'm also taking you into ancient Egypt, and this is a pyramid construction scene. Kind of hard to see here, but you can check it out online or something. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on there. Each time it goes through one of the different stages, it's actually it's a different part of the beetle's life. This otherworldly beetle. This is actually the pupa stage, where he's being put into a resurrection chamber, is what the Egyptians like to do with their pharaohs, because they believe that they would rise again. And so that was the belief here too, and that's actually what happens. A beetle, kind of in a way, it starts as an egg, as we started back here, the one that's here at the show. That egg grows, into a larva. The larva feeds and gets real fat for a while, and then eventually it actually pukes up a lot of what's inside it and turns it into a cocoon where it stays for a little while and basically kind of dies and then resurrects as a full-grown beetle. And so that's what we have here is the final stage, 4 of 4, of the Atlas Metamorphosis, and that's the God Beetle, as I called him. Each stage actually had a different name. This is God Beetle, that was King Pupa, this one's Lord Worm, and this one here again is Emperor Egg. So each one of them again was like, they had to have a fancy name. But yeah, so that's essentially where this series was going, and so this is the final stage, and there's a lot more to be done, I guess, with it. That I have a lot of ideas. So this is kind of where I'm at with some of it now too. Kind of been doing a series of drawings called Beyond Atlas, where it's kind of like taking you now like into this, like I guess future time or whatever, where all this has been passed and eroded, and these are kind of almost just like old artifacts that are like being covered by sand dunes and graffiti. So I think that's going to be a fun place to go with it. As you can see, this kind of like these cathedrals here, and God Beetle is now long since died. I also had a little book that I made, a little insect-sized book. We're kind of out of time already. So these are a few of my other pieces. That's at the Art Car Museum right now for their COVID show. And you can find more of my work online at vincentfink.com, and you can read all about all this stuff and find more of my work there. Thank you.
I don't know if everybody can hear me good. Yeah, okay, so hi, my name is Jd Salinger, and before I start talking about the images, I wanted to give you guys a little background about what my practice is about. So I am a first-generation American. Both of my parents are immigrants from El Salvador, and I use my practice to think about early and more recent memories of living in between two cultures and living in between two languages. So this allows me to create a space to consider how cultures merge, when they merge, and I use colorful, recognizable objects. There's a lot of specific symbolism in the objects that I choose to include in the paintings, and I also like to use a lot of nostalgic materials like glitter, holographic paper, color pencils, things that remind me of my childhood. So portraying these moments lets me reflect on how the passage of time affects how memories take on new meaning as you get older and you look back. And it just lets me think about why I'm saving these moments, and my desire to save them relates to my place in between these two cultures and how I belong to both, but really I don't belong to either fully. So the first piece is Reunion, and it's around the corner. It's actually the title I picked because reunion is a word that's spelled the same in English and in Spanish, and it's based on a photo that I took before the pandemic when I had a reunion with my parents at a coffee place that seemed very casual, but after the pandemic started, I didn't really get to see them. So the picture and the reunion felt even more meaningful. I wanted to have a way to kind of show the passage of time, so I used the flower design that was in my coffee to have these 6 petals, kind of the 6 months I didn't go to see them, about half of what is in a flower. And just thinking about reunions and how no matter how much time has passed between seeing friends and family, once you see them, it's like the time we spent apart didn't really happen. This next piece, the title is The Thing with Space Is, and the planetary shape is based on a drawing that I made when I was a little kid many, many years ago. And I kind of used that to ground the piece and how I was thinking about space, how I during the pandemic had all this space to think about space as a physical and an imaginary place. It's made me think about all the socks I've lost to this void of space every time I do laundry, the space keyboard on the keyboard. I wanted to use these materials that kind of illustrated that nostalgia I felt with the planetary shapes. I used this really cool glitter that you can't really see, and the holographic paper again to just kind of spell out the word space. And yeah, just reflecting on the past year and how much space we all had physically and mentally. The next piece is the green room. This is another piece that is around the corner. And the green room is a term that is used in like music or performance. It's the practice area before a musician goes to perform on stage. And to me, all of last year kind of felt like a green room. We were all just waiting for, I guess, things to get better, the pandemic to be over, and just planning the next steps about what I would do after. So there's a lot of eyes because I felt like I was just watching a lot of different things, and then the road is a glitter road to better days ahead. Next piece is called No Such Thing. So there's a lot of imagery of games and play and a lot of good luck and bad luck. So with No Such Thing, I'm trying to convey that there is no such thing as good and bad luck. There's a lot of superstitious sayings like, don't open an umbrella indoors, that's bad luck. The dice, there's also a word scramble, and just having the road and the silver, like the silver road, letting me kind of reflect on, oh, we're almost done. Okay, last few, so this one's called Half Empty, Half Full, just based on that old saying of the glass half empty, half full. I wanted to kind of show the flow of drops falling in and things spilling out. And then the last piece, which is one of my newest pieces, is called A Gathering, and just the table and how the table is at the heart of a lot of my memories. But yeah, I'm out of time, but thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Felipe Fernandez. I am from San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, and I moved to the United States at the age of 4. My work kind of revolves around my cultural identity of being Mexican born but migrating to the United States at an early age. And so unlike my brothers who spent several years there, they were able to speak the language, experience the culture. I came here before I even fully knew Spanish, so I kind of had to assimilate into the culture. And growing up in school, I was actually, bullied or picked on if I spoke Spanish. So for my most recent body of work, I've actually done this dive into my cultural identity, and it is focused on kind of like the memories that I did have as a child traveling back to visit family. And most of those are actually revolved around going to the market, because when we went to Mexico, it wasn't to be a tourist, it was to visit family. And so the only time I actually explored Mexico would be whenever we would go into the city in order to get groceries, right, or buy supplies that we needed, right, just to be with our family. And so that's kind of what my work is revolved around. So this piece right here, it's called La Técnica y la Nueva Generación. It is a cut paper piece. And before I kind of speak about this and about this technique, I'm actually going to just show some of my other body of works in order to provide some context. So this one here, it is an oil painting. It's called Plaza Caribalde. So Plaza Caribalde is a really well-known market square in Mexico City. where mariachis go and perform, and people kind of go there to listen to the music, dance, eat at the Mercado. If you look in the back distance, you can see the lights of the Mercado where the food vendors are at. This one right here is called Rebeldía de Juventud. This kind of like puts together my experience growing up as a Mexican immigrant with these two Pachuco dressed youths dancing. So the Pachucos were like these Mexican immigrants that grew up in California. They were forced to assimilate, and their way to rebel was to adopt jazz music and the zoot suits, and they kind of adjusted them to, meet their own artistic, expressions. This one right here is the painting of the Cupcaker piece that I did. This one's Hugo Mora. This is a painting of a clown or a street performer. And so in Mexico, it's very common whenever you're at a red light, you will see street performers perform in order to earn a daily living. And this is a picture of him at the end of the night once he's exhausted and he's just taking a break. I had a conversation with them, and I was like, after I got to know him a little bit better, I was like, hey, is it okay if I painted you? And so I photographed him and painted him at the end of the day. This is called Mercado San Juan. So this is actually one of my earliest memories from my childhood. And it is whenever my mom would take us into town to get money that our dad would send from the United States and pick up groceries. And kind of like our reward for being well behaved was she would buy us like tortas at the market and like chocomil. And like that would be the only time we would eat out, because other than that we would eat at home. And so it was always a special experience. And so going back, this is like the earliest memory that I can remember. And so I decided to pick that. This one's Sabor de Mexico. Spices are very, okay. So let me go back then. All right, so this piece, it was actually inspired during quarantine because I was kept out of my studio, so I had to continue creating works without painting in oils because of the fumes. And so this is inspired, and it has a deep tradition in Mexico where the indigenous people would work with the mate, which would be tree bark. And so they would write and their history on it. They would also cut out figurines for ceremonies. And whenever the Spanish came, they also brought a lot of products from Europe that were wrapped around in tissue paper, and it was known as papel de China. And so then they started making these cutouts that were marked to be a celebration. And so they're used for religious celebrations, birthday celebrations. And so because my work celebrates Mexican culture, I decided to make these works of papel picado.
Hello, my name is, can you hear me? My name is Yuru Huang. I was born in Taiwan, and I'm here over 40 years. In 2005, I started a project. For this project, I asked people, all kind of people, I asked them to look to their life experience, to think of some words, and they wrote the words onto the shape of human body, and words like this, okay, to Venus magic, so whatever, all kinds of really. And I put them, collect the hundreds of those words, and I put them in installation like this one you can see there, an object that sometimes for a long time put them in object that carry a metaphoric implication. What is metaphoric implication such as a door? The door carry, imply the new experience. So this one in Vietnam War Memorial, and one side is the image of the brutal war, the other side is the war after the Vietnam War had people, all kind of refugee or people, local people, all the different ideologies in this world. So, and on the right, on the top, is this Nobel laureate. He wrote a word, very precious word, and he went to bed, and then a lot of people find their word, and they share the experience. So, and this is a piece of a lantern. You know, when you see the word in dark, they give you the new meaning in the Taiwanese Community Center. And this one is a light box in a city hall. It's interactive. It's called, in this light, I see a mother, a soldier, a refugee, a time and a place. And this is a time when Anise Parker was our mayor. We did a lot of work to celebrate. It's interactive in City Hall. And this one is a current project. It's called Time in the Tide Pool. And you know, I put those words on a lot of things, a kite, you know, puzzles, and this one on chopsticks, because this mural project is called Time in the Tide Pool. You know, tide pool has implication, and this tide pool chopstick have implication for people who use chopstick and for people who cross culture. And think of yourself, don't you all cross culture? I mean, if you're an old person, you have to cross a lot of culture. So, so this is the, and I use, they don't write word, it's just Arabic numbers. So this was sponsored by City and by the Idea Fund, is, you know, Andy Warhol, their foundation. And I also put those words on objects that have no metaphoric implications, such as the war piece. This one is from last year's big show. I try to put those words in layers and see how they interact and interact with each other, like, because in our current world, the ideologies, you know, interact with each other. And then I was thinking of my, during the COVID, I was thinking of my participant, you know, the monk to the very right. He passed away, and this guy in the protester, he yelled out so loud, and he wrote his precious word and run away, disappeared. And then this one is the physician that treats a COVID patient in Baylor Medical School, and then the cancer patient's daughter, you know, wrote the word cure it. And so anyway, it's time. And this is, so I think what I am creating is a portrait. Portrait is like you take a selfie from your inner self. So this is the image I'm going to use, give to my student this semester. I want to, this is a painting and this is a book, but social scientists and the artists look at the same thing, we just present it differently. And I think I want to pay tribute to the artists, to Longdale, to all of us here, because I think art bears witness to our time. You know, what we are doing here bears witness to Houston, to right now. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Huff. Thank you for being here. So a bit about me. I am studying painting at the University of Houston, where I also just finished my Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. And when I graduate this spring, I'll be pursuing my Master of Fine Arts in painting. So my background is in painting, but all of these works that you see here today, except for one, is a collage. And that's because collage offers a lot of opportunities that drawing and painting can't. So collage, it comes with its own challenges. And a reason for that is it's work made by somebody else. It's a ready-made object. And from that, you know, collage is printed photographs of someone else's photograph, of someone else's painting or drawing, And as an artist, you have to take that and create your own work with your own stamp on it, which is definitely a challenge. And the way I like to do that is through fragmentation. So I like to fragment words, I like to disrupt them, I like to play with removal methods, and that relates to my recent career change from science to art, which is my passion. And this is my work that's in the big show. It's called New Skin. It's inspired by my father. And this work is about the weight that a man carries for his family in order to support his family. And he has to keep up a kind of facade in order to continue his role. When that facade kind of comes crumbling down, then he has to build himself a new skin. And that's what this work is about. So a lot of my works have a story, but also some of them just speak through the materials themselves, like this one here. And collage, again, it's so different from painting because it allows for the use of different mediums. You can use multimedia and just jump right into it. And that's what I did right here, is play with a lot of different mediums, creating my own texture, you know, taking something like collage and putting my own stamp on it. Here, in this collage, I was letting formal elements kind of guide the work and speak for it rather than have a story. So elements like shape, line, and color really made the work what it was, centered around a swan. And then from collage, it also allowed opportunities of installation processes. So I got to play around with that with this work, which I deconstructed a canvas. And I did this because I learned that the frame of the canvas was made of baby pine trees, and I thought, that's so unfair, you know, they'd never had a chance. And thinking along those lines, I thought I'm gonna make this an homage to the baby pine trees and give them that chance. And so what I did was cut up the canvas, the viewer steps onto the canvas, and when they reach the pedestal, they see nothing more than the staples that held the frame together, you know, which is kind of silly. But when you look beyond the pedestal and the staples and all these material things, you see what really matters, which is a tree stump that I created from the frame of the canvas, which is the real homage to the baby pine trees. And another work of mine, playing with installation processes, is this. It's a paper frame with collage, and I wanted the viewer to play with three different ways of viewing, so they had that choice, they had that confrontation, and this is one perspective, and they had the option to walk around the piece and see two different sides of the same work. And this is my last piece. I was thinking about nature, the life cycle, and how the sea's role in that. And I was inspired to work off the canvas, bring in new materials and problem solve with them as I go. Thank you very much for your time.
Can you press just the arrow keys? Okay. Here and start my timer. Hi. Take this off here for a while. I'm Ron S. Levy. I always add the S to my name because I didn't know when I grew up, I didn't think there were many Levys in the world. South town in southwest Pennsylvania. But if you just put into Google Ron S. Levy, nothing else, my portfolio site on lens culture comes up at the top, and you can get extra explanations and all, and a lot more about my work and examples. Today I would like to also thank you all for coming, and Lawndale for putting this on. And today I'm going to be showing my a subset, a sub-series I call it, of a work, of the kind of work I've been doing since around 2013. The whole work is called Vibrant Night, but these are sub-series from it. And this sub-series is called The Mountains of East Texas. Parentheses, there are no mountains in East Texas. Okay? And it's the basic concept through the whole major encompassing series, which is basically different landscapes at night in Texas. I'm a fine art landscape photographer who specializes in light painting, which is beams of light over a landscape, color toned, and then further post-process, because not at all documentary shots. They're works of the imagination, but using what's out there. But one thing that's underlying just about all of my sub-series, and especially this, is that based on my background, I see the basic concept underlying this as a psychological concept, which is called cognitive reframing, which is basically learning to look at things in a different light, to give you a different perspective on things. There's also a therapeutic application of it called cognitive restructuring, part of cognitive behavioral therapy, and helps people see cognitive distortions that are bothering them and help correct them. Now I'd like to, these are things like overgeneralization, all or none thinking, and magnification versus, or minimization of something. There's a number of others which we don't have time to talk about. But what I'd like to do here is try something a little different. Instead of me talking and talking, I'd like to get your opinion on an issue that I'm facing, which is concerning the reveal shot of this, the last shot. And so I'm going to take you through the series. I want to basically see whether it ruins it for people or whether it elucidates something like the concept. So I'm going to go start this right now. Okay, this is, instead of talking, I just want you to sort of experience this long night's journey with me on a strange land. This is the next to the last one, so think of what you're experiencing so far, and now I'm going to do the reveal shot, where what these mountains are actually are. So all these shots, these things that you were seeing were actually magnified. This kind of almost everything you were seeing was no more than 10 to 20 feet high mud piles outside a place that does surface mining of sand and gravel. And now let me just ask now, how many people here, if you have an opinion, thought that this last shot ruined it for you? Okay. How many people thought that it might have elucidated the whole concept of the cognitive reframing? Okay, well then that's what I came here to do, and I'm finished right on.
Hi, my name is Pat McHenry, and I wanted to start by thanking Lawndale for their careful work to organize the show, the big show, the really, really big show, it looks like to me, and for inviting us to talk about our work. It's a very generous thing to do, and I appreciate that. So you'll see my piece in the show. It's called Jimmy Savannah, after a poem by Patricia Smith. And then I'm going to show you several pieces that are part of a series called Living Within the Moon. And at the end, I'll talk more specifically about Jimmy Savannah. These pieces are part of a narrative series of a world inhabited by women living elsewhere. They have abandoned the earth in favor of a space where there are no societal structures in place to limit their choices, a place of few constraints and great freedoms for women. And I know that you're thinking this is fantasy, and it is, in fact. And I decided that these women should live within the moon, a feminine symbol. So I usually start by pouring tea onto the watercolor paper to make abstracted organic shapes. I begin to respond to these tea forms and decide whether to alter them with inks and graphite or to let them be. And what I think I do is I project onto these forms the dilemma that I feel about constraint versus freedom. For me, this process is very similar to the process that I and many women engage in when they make decisions about how much to give to others, which I see as constraint, and how much to give to ourselves, which I see is the freedom continuum. Oops. Not yet, Anthony. So I'm back here with Jimmy Savannah, which was inspired by a TV series during COVID lockdown that was set in the 1800s. And there was a masked ball. And it was beautiful, full of chandeliers. And the main thing was that there were people together in a room talking and dancing and having fun. And I kept wanting to say, no, 6 feet, 6 feet. You got to move back. But I love the image. So what I did is I started blocking in this image with Frisket to keep the whites, which are different. And that was a different way of starting than I normally do with just throwing tea. And I think it was because I wanted some agency in the middle of COVID lockdown. I wanted something that I could control. And then I responded to what I saw. And I made the chandelier, I made the woman wearing the chandelier. And then on the left side, as you see it, I saw a shape that was figurative. And it looked like she was dancing. I decided I could make her into a person who was dancing. And then I saw she had a peg leg. And that sealed the deal. I thought, this is great. She needs to be in this painting. And then I made the third woman and so on. And finally, I collaged the fleur-de-lis across the shoulder of the largest woman. And I had read that the fleur-de-lis was used to brand the shoulders of escaped and recaptured enslaved people in New Orleans. And this was also a time when we were all learning about George Floyd, which was horrible. So my intention in this piece and in this series is to focus on the societal structures affecting the freedom and constraint for women, both in the process of the making of the image and in the exploration of the imagined possibilities for women. Thank you.
So I had to write my
narrative, otherwise I'll forget. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here, listening to us share our art, our processes, our inspirations, our truths. My name is Anthony Pagliano, a portraitist, an artist, a human being. My English pronouns are he, him, his, and if I were speaking my native language, siya, the sole third-person pronoun in Tagalog. Born in the Philippines, the first decade of my life was spent there before my sisters and I had the opportunity to escape to America, to Corpus Christi. I have since lived in a few cities here, but in the past 7 years, Houston has been home, workplace, playground, all of that. But since re-pursuing the arts again, Houston has also been a muse. As the most diversity in the nation, we hear conversations easily and quickly traverse the globe by simply turning our heads from one side of the room to another. The people I have met, the stories I have heard, felt that their varied journeys filled with struggles, perseverance, achievement, survival have activated and inspired me to contribute even slightly through visual means in acknowledging their presence, validating their experiences as worthy of being told and heard, and documenting their being and sharing their humanity. I rendered the human form through traditional dry and wet media. However, since high school, paper has been my predominant medium. I convey the three-dimensionality of form by cutting blocks of paper and layering them with the layers of paper in gradations of color and tone that are cut in such a way that follow the contours of the different values in the form. I use my art, even if it's just slightly, to place a spotlight and celebrate people I have met who may not have necessarily been on a platform for others to fully see them, meet them where they are, and acknowledge their presence, their worth, their being. Over the years, as I get fully immersed, lost in every portrait I create, I slowly began to gain the courage to turn the lens towards me, slowly putting into view, searching for and magnifying the roots of who I am. Through this pursuit, I have realized that seeing others is seeing ourselves, no matter how faint the reflections of ourselves we perceive may be. Though generally we may never truly know, fully feel what others have or have had to endure in their own lives and their ancestors' lives, we do have the capacity to learn and gain an understanding if only we were willing to open our eyes and bear witness ourselves firsthand to others' constant struggles to be heard, to be seen, and to be treated with dignity as the equally human, equally deserving human beings that they are. They are us and we them. I pursue the physical process of my art for the metaphors that speak in words I understand. I am an introverted person by nature, shy and reclusive, very guarded of my feelings inside, and for most of my life, opening myself up slowly, a layer at a time, to people I trust would not be bulls in a porcelain shop. I have slowly, very slowly realized over the years that this guardedness was born out of personal struggles of abandonment, of hunger, of poverty I experienced early in my childhood. The younger version of me that escaped that life over 20 years ago repressed all of those traumas he barely understood. With the benefit of distance and time away from those experiences, I understand. I have always known as a kid that not wasting food, saving scraps are the right thing to do. But today I fully understand why I have to eat every single grain of rice on my plate, why every pail of water not fully efficiently used to its full extent, why I save almost every single scrap of paper, even the tiniest pieces. For many of those early years, I lived with very little and some points barely nothing from starvation. I have suppressed these emotions for 2 decades, with some of these painful emotions seeping out in the past few years through art, but my experiences from the trees earlier this year caused the floodgates to burst, and everything I have tried to forget were immediately released all at once. The lack of electricity, water, cold nights, a sense of abandonment, homelessness, staying at a friend's house for over a week afterwards reminded me of my childhood traumas all at once. Suddenly, without warning, without time to prepare myself for the darkness that soon enveloped me. So this artwork is born out of that. And as I continue to move forward, lighter, freer of repressed emotions and painful memories that heavily weighed in me, and equipped with the ability to acknowledge the ability of those experiences, I'm now at a point where I can move past lighter and become a more wholesome human being. Sorry, I don't run out of time, but this is a Bayong. Now that I'm freer, lighter, I can look back at my past and explore ideas that are true to who I am, who I was, and who I have become to be. And this is hand-woven paper. Thank you.
Landscape section over here. Fast forward this thing. Whoop, too fast. Okay, first slide. For this talk, I thought I'd give you some background on how I make these things. My current method of working, painting on laser cut wooden shapes started with a painting on the right-hand side here, the monkey. I tried to do him on painted on a traditional rectangular canvas and could not get it to work. If I got the composition the way I liked it, I lost the meaning that you couldn't see that God, it's a mushroom cloud that's coming up there. And I went back and forth for a week or two trying to get it to work. And all of a sudden the idea hit me. Take it out of the frame. Take it out of the frame. And I'd already taken a laser cutting class at a local makerspace. So off I went to cut out my design in a piece of birch plywood with a laser. And on the right, you'll see a kind of a little more backstory. That's one of the laser cutters behind me, and that is a blank painting shape before I've done anything else to it. Once you've done the laser part, the rest of it's pretty much like a conventional painting. Put gesso on it, paint it with acrylic. Let's see. Oops. I'll get forward and backward in a minute here. During the summer of 2017, my series on nuclear war had pretty much run its course, and I became interested in reinterpreting superheroes. I had some issues with Wonder Woman always being depicted as young and curvy. I wanted an old Wonder Woman, so I stuck my own face on Wonder Woman's body, and I've done several of those. I've done Batman, I've done a number. Superheroes for me are kind of like archetypes of our culture, and I have had a really good time painting those, and I hope other people have had that same feeling looking at them. Anyway, after that, I made a number of pieces that satirize what I term the commodification of women. I've done Barbie legs as French fries. I've done Barbie legs in tuna tins, too far. Sardine cans. Whoops. Yeah. I don't do left and right well. I obviously don't do forward and backward. Okay, wait a minute. Slow down. Am I going the right direction?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, back up. Okay, that was the sardines. And by 2019, I pretty much felt like I exhausted that the superheroes and the feminist satire. So I did some real world heroes. Whoops, this thing is very touchy. These four women were the first female welders in the Navy, circa 1943. I took a section of an old Naval Archives photo and worked with it. That's the painting I came out with. And here's the painting to show. The last painting I did with the laser, because once we were in lockdown, had no laser cutter access. I have been experimenting with some other materials in the meantime. Discovered some stuff that's used in cosplay and theater for fake armor and things like that. It's called Eva Foam. Very flexible, very, cuts like butter with a utility knife. So that's what this is. It's not quite finished. I'm just playing with it. As you can see, it's very flexible. I don't have to worry about things breaking. And I'm about out of time anyway, so I think I better stop there before I do anything else bad in the computer. I will do one more slide. That is my contact information and my website. You're welcome to write it down. I also left some cards by the drink pail back there. Feel free to grab one.
First of all, thank you for your presence and your time. I appreciate that you chose to spend it here with us. It's not really, you've seen these before. I'm often hesitant to talk about the ideas for the artwork that I've made, because I think that once I'm done with the piece, the viewer is the one who makes art from it. So each time it's seen, it's a new piece of art made from mine. But having said that, I'm going to talk about the ideas for my art, because I got 4 more minutes to fill. The main driver for my artwork is an idea I call holistic absurdity, which is basically an idea of universality combined with the recognition that existence is ludicrous, but in a good way, a wondrous way. The piece in this show is part of a series that you've seen before. These are expressions of the notion that we can't truly know everything about anything, that there's a hidden world from us, hidden by our limited perception and the capacity for understanding. Simultaneously, there is all things in one thing. I think we often mislead ourselves with the notion of either or, when the nature of things is more and. There's an Indian mystic named Sadhguru who has a quote along the lines of, if you look at the sky, you'd say it's blue because it's what you see, but what you see is the light reflected back, so the sky is actually every color except blue. So it's really blue and everything is not blue at the same time. This is a piece called Portrait of Schrodinger's Cat. Schrodinger's cat is a thought experiment in quantum physics. The idea is basically if you had a cat in a steel box with a means of it potentially dying, then you could say it's alive and dead at the same time, because it's a description of, on the quantum level, things exist as possibilities until they're observed. So reality actually isn't reality until it's observed, and then it goes back into the state of possibility. It's never really real. So that is two sides, but the same thing on both sides. So you can't actually see a portrait. This one is called My World Piece. It's about unseen impacts that humanity has, that there's pretty much nothing that's untouched. It's a piece of tree bark. On the inside you can see trails of the larva that killed the tree. And then on the outside it's painted with automotive paint that changes color as you walk around it or it moves. And then this last piece is called Adjacent to the Flashing Thunderbolts. It is a interactive piece that I was able to build with a grant from the Houston Arts Alliance and the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. This piece, you make your own experience. So when you put your hands on the pad, it tells you to pull the lever. But when you lift your hand off to pull the lever, it tells you to put your hand back down. So you have to figure out how to use it. And when you do, it turns the sculpture on the other unit, not the one that you're standing in. So the idea is that we don't necessarily know our impact on the world. There's more than we can know about how we interact. So in conclusion, my art is basically that no one knows anything. Thank you.
And I'm a poet and a writer, and this is actually my first time exhibiting as a visual artist, so thank you, Wandale. This is my piece that is what I call a large-scale erasure poem. If you've never heard of an erasure poem or a blackout poem, it's essentially a poem that is made out of text by another writer, and you black out or erase parts of the text, and what remains is a poem. And so this is part of a series that I'm doing called Man Erased. All of the texts in the series come from pieces by male authors. And this is from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter Thompson. The poem reads, "Bad evidence. Fire had consumed the maid, forgotten. A woman with a face like an axe handle. I thought she was ready. An old woman, a non-existent channel, but she was naked." And so for this piece, I print out text on a large piece of paper and then do the erasure with acrylic paint. This is one of my earliest erasures. All of my early erasures started on actual book pages that I ripped out of books. And this one is from Lolita. When I was starting out as a writer, a lot of people told me you have to read the classics, but it usually meant men. That's usually what they meant by that. And I also read Lolita in college. That's the first time I read it, and we read it as satire. So I wanted to kind of satirize men's work in this way. And yeah, so that's that one. I'm not going to read them all because it would take forever. In a conversation with these authors, my work attempts to point towards the problematic male gaze and at the same time destroy beliefs about male words and the way that men write. In this way, erasure is a conversation between the poet and the canon. At times, the act of erasing a text shows how violent male writing can be, and at other times, how fragile. This is from Philip Roth. And the poem says, "Wilderness. American boys were bleeding in rivers of fire. Burden is the Lord's will. It is the Lord's will to be strong." This one is one of my first experimenting with watercolors. It's really difficult to do on such a small scale to get the words to come through because the page is like a pulp paper, so that it really soaks up the ink. And this is from Isaac Asimov, who is a sci-fi writer and the author of I, Robot. He also wrote a book under a pseudonym called The Sensuous Dirty Old Man, in which he outlined how he could get away with fondling young women. And the poem reads, "I, Robot, one girl was the only human being worth a great deal. Her thin, plain face, oily, from somewhere designed only such." This piece is an erasure of Norman Mailer. For this one, I actually cut out the page and applied paint to it. Norman Mailer was famously homophobic, and he hated women, and he opposed contraception. He actually stabbed his second wife. And so this one reads, Their marriage relieved the tension. His wife was dead. Their bodies cold and jarring, oppressive. This is an example of a digital erasure. So with this one, I actually put the text into Word and I highlight certain words and use the font colors to make the other words be erased. And I think you might be able to guess the original text. Loomings, some years ago, call me Ishmael. Nothing on the shore. I sail and see the watery world is grim. My soul and my soul, pausing, coffin strong, the substitute for sea, sword. I quietly take to the ship. All men cherish the ocean now. Her surf, extreme waterward, battery, washed by waves, cooled by breezes. Water gazers, posted silent. What do you see, silent sentinels? Reveries. Thousands upon thousands of mortal men fixed in ocean reveries of pent-up seaweed green fields. This is another Norman Mailer, which I won't read that one. And then at some point I started adding like images. So this is like an old fairy tale art that's in the public domain, and then I used a fairy tale over it to add the words. And then these last two are other large-scale erasures that I've done. This one is Catcher in the Rye by Jd Salinger, and that's watercolor. And then this one is from an essay called Consider the Lobster by David Foster Wallace. So that's it. Thank you.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Madison Isasaga. I made a piece titled Invisible Illness for the show that can be found in the embodiment section. So to start off my talk, I'm going to read y'all the artist statement I sent over to Lawndale to explain the work. So sorry if it's a little choppy as I read this, as I change it from third person to first person, because that'd be even more awkward to say. So this work is my response. Oh, hello. It'd be helpful to see it. Okay, there we go. So this work is my response to questions about the repercussions of living with an invisible illness. In particular, how living with a physical illness influences our relationships and public behavior. I am interested in challenging societal norms and expectations of how chronic illness and physical disabilities manifest themselves in public and private life. Physical ailments are often a matter of social taboo, something to be concealed and hid. The act of concealment becomes a barrier to connection and a catalyst for increased exterior confusion. It is not the diagnosis itself that is lethal, but the violent social suppression of it. Invisibility becomes synonymous with shame. Just because something is invisible does not make it unworthy of being seen. So if you pick up from that, I have a chronic illness, actually called cystic fibrosis, and I'll get more into that as my talk goes on. But in this piece, I always have a lot of questions of like, how do I better visualize and explain like a condition that's invisible, much less make it into a visual medium. So for me, I've been very well dressed and familiar with the hospital gown. So that's a garment that's become weirdly like intimate to me and part of my identity. So I was interested in trying to make like a camouflage effect, trying to blur like the visible and invisible by taking this repeated hospital gown pattern and applying it over an entire female mannequin. So this is another piece I made in collaboration with a partner when I was living in Utah. So this piece is called Hospital Gown, and I was interested in kind of challenging the utilitarian function that the hospital gown has. Like it's very drab, even like embarrassing. So I was wanting to make it feel more beautiful, but still have it function in the way it was actually designed to. So having it be exposed in the back and have it completely tied in the back that still honors its function was important to me in designing this piece. And we made, the fabric here actually came from an existing hospital gown. So the inside is actually about organ donation and transplantation. 4 years ago, I had a double lung transplant. So this piece is also reflective of that. And I was interested in taking flowers, an organic thing, and this weird juxtaposition of like taking an organic thing out of its environment, putting it somewhere else, and that tension of like man-made control. And what would happen to this piece, the longer it was up, to watch the flowers gradually deteriorate and die, which of course any organ tissue, transplanted or not, eventually does. So I have a next little section to this. So while I was waiting for my transplant here over at St. Luke's, I started to notice like a lot of crosses on the roads. And I thought about potential organ donors. So I've gone around all over here in the Houston area photographing these. So I'll end on this note. So for me, when making my artwork, like as personal as it is, I'm trying to better communicate also that it's not an exclusive issue, that it is a societal issue, and organ donation is something everyone can take part of. So this is a series of mine, ongoing, and I use body bags, and I pull up quotes from deceased organ donors. So she says, "My disappointments are God's divine appointments," and I thought it reflected well for how she died and how she continued to go on. Thank you.